Gregg Braden to get sick tonight. You'll come back with some horrible flu that'll hit you.
The person that's creating
the creator, exactly.
That's right.
Why is that then? If this matrix is supposed to be neutral, that there's yin and yang, it's positive, negative, it's the same. It balances. Why is it when somebody attempts evil, it eventually comes back and really gets them?
I think a part of this may be this is so new, George. We're still exploring the language, and semantics may be coming into it here, and I think we're both essentially saying the same thing. The field, the matrix, is the overall container. It's the stuff that holds the universe together. Within that container, it appears that consciousness is like a sub-program, if you will. And consciousness is the operating system that we're working with. So it is our responsibility as the role of programming what it is that we're experiencing. It's our responsibility to recognize right and wrong and good and evil. And the fact that it comes back, both good comes back tenfold as well.
I agree with that.
That the good, and we've seen it in the healings. It takes a relatively few number of people to create that kind of healing. Actually, statistics show it's the square root of 1% of a given population. Square root of 1%. I've shared that number in this program before. The square root of 1% of any population is a very small number. So in a city of 1 million people, to create a feeling of peace or an experience of peace, it takes a little over 100 people in a city of 1 million. Or on a planet of 6 billion people, the square root of 1% is a little over 8,000 people. And that is the minimum number to kickstart that experience of peace. The more that, obviously, that participate, the greater the effect. But what it's saying, in quantum terms, in modern experience, is essentially the old parable, George, that the power of the mustard seed. It takes a relatively few number of people that understand this language and can hone their feeling. And there's a whole conversation we could have about how scattered, our feelings in our heart. How often do we really have the ability to hold a focused, coherent emotion in our hearts of something that has already happened, of the healing of our loved ones that's already happened, or the peace in our community? So when these experiences are mirrored back to us, I think it shows us how pure and how quickly we can change what we see happening in our world.
Yet, Greg, not everyone who believes gets healed. Let's say here's an example, somebody's got cancer, and you cited the example of a tumor that went away. I believe that happens. But then we also have someone who believes, who prays, and their cancer spreads, and they end up dying. Why does that happen?
George, the first thing I'll say is we never have all the information, and I wouldn't claim to know all of the reasons. If we believe in karma, if we believe in past lives, and all kinds of things may come into play. But I understand your question, and I've seen this happen. I know the man that filmed the tumor disappearing in the medicaless hospital, and I asked him the question. I said, those 3 practitioners helped that woman to heal. Could she have done it on her own if they weren't there? And he said, in all probability, she could have, but there's something about us humans in that we feel more empowered when we're supported by others that believe as we do. And the flip side of that is if she did not make the changes, and what I didn't say, and I apologize because this is the rest of the story. Before those people in those medicineless hospitals undergo those healings, they're trained in life-affirming ways to change their life. They learn new ways to eat, new ways to breathe, new ways to move, all the things we're talking about in our country, diet, exercise, fresh air, nutrition. If those 3 practitioners had created the effect of that healing in her body, and she had chosen to stay with the old lifestyle, it's very possible that healing would be temporary, just as today. I have friends who've had cancers that have been removed surgically. 6 months later, they come back, and then they say, well, I thought the doctor got it, and they got that one, but because they never changed the belief or the lifestyle that the belief is allowing for, the blueprint in what we would call the divine matrix, the stuff where matter originates. That blueprint has never been addressed, and I think on a small scale, that's the answer that we're looking at. On a big scale, on a global scale, we're all looking at the same principle on a very large scale. Are we learning that diversity is our greatest strength, and that the cooperation is going to get us further than competition? And I think that is the question that we are answering at this moment in this time in history.
Well, are you convinced that there's an intelligence then in this matrix?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because when you look at the way scientists describe this matrix, George, it except for the language, it sounds a lot like what we would call heaven or the heavens in the ancient traditions.
You stole my question.
Sure.
But you're right.
Where if there's an essence to life that leaves the body at the moment of death, where does that essence go? Mm-hmm. The ancients say it's in the heavens. What modern researchers and scientists now believe is that that energetic essence is now part of the collective that is in this divine matrix, in this field, until it becomes individual again. The field is believed to be the seat of the soul, the origin of the heavens. It's where we go in between lifetimes. If we for people that use that terminology.
I'll have you give us some examples when we come back, Greg,
sure,
of people who have been able to use the matrix. I won't use the phrase tap into it because you believe we're already in it. So we'll talk about that and much more. In the next hour, we'll open up the phone lines. By the looks of things, you're calling already. Slow down. There's nobody here to answer them. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment at Coast to Coast AM. And, of course, Gregg Braden, our special guest. Like I said, next hour, we'll open up all the phone lines for you. I'll give you an opportunity to jump on board as we talk about the divine matrix. And welcome back to Coast. Greg, let's talk a little bit also about, and I want you to give us some examples of how this all works. But what's the science behind this?
Well, the science in terms of the existence of the field or how it works, or both?
Both.
Well, this is the reason I've written the book the way I have, George. The first part of the book tells us the science. Some of it's so new it's not even in textbooks yet. The experiments that were done in the late 90s, for example, University of Geneva in Switzerland, Nicholas Gizon, where they were showing where they would take a particle, a quantum particle, split it in half, so that each half was identical to the other. They had essentially twins. And they fired those particles in opposite directions from one another, 7 miles in one direction, 7 miles in the other. So they were 14 miles apart. And this gave them the opportunity to do these experiments that just astounded everyone. What they found was when they would disturb one of those particles on one end of the experiment, the other one 14 miles away acted like it was the one that was having the experience, as if they were still connected, even though they weren't. And in some cases, the connection was happening so quickly, it was traveling faster than the speed of light, so they knew that it wasn't one particle signaling another, that somehow they're actually connected, and the term that's used now is entangled. And this is a brilliant man, Dean Radin, now has a new book out, Entangled Minds, where he's talking about this phenomenon of entanglement. And there's another principle that comes in here that I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of a holographic principle. And the holographic principle essentially is the principle that it suggests that when we have a little fragment of something, that little fragment mirrors the whole something. So for example, if we were to take a few years ago, back in the 80s, there were these shiny holographic bookmarks. You'd hold them in the light, and the image would look like it was floating above your hand.
All right.
And if anybody has these, you can do an experiment, but you can only do it once because you'll destroy your bookmark. You can cut that little bookmark into about a bajillion pieces, George, and you can take the smallest one and even cut it in half again. And if it's truly holographic, when you hold it under a magnifier, that little fragment, no matter what shape it is, you'll see the entire image in that shape, because that is the definition of a hologram. The whole is always reproduced in every fragment, no matter how small. And this is important because